What if I told you that a handful of wandering warriors from the edge of a crumbling empire would one day rise to rule 3 continents? And what if I told you that their empire would last over 6 centuries, outliving crusades, kingdoms, and dynasties, only to vanish almost overnight? This is not legend. This is the real story of the Ottoman Empire, from humble Ghazis on the Anatolian frontier to the masters of a world-spanning superpower. Picture this. It's the late 13th century. The Byzantine Empire is fading, Mongols thunder from the east, and chaos consumes Anatolia. Amid that turmoil, a small tribe led by a man named Osman begins carving out a destiny no one could have imagined. His followers fight not for wealth, but for faith, honor, and survival. Yet their swords will forge one of the most powerful empires in history. But how did nomads in tattered tents become emperors ruling from the jeweled halls of Constantinople? How did their armies sweep through Europe and the Middle East like a storm? And what secret kept them united for 600 years? This is the entire history of the Ottoman Empire. The birth of an empire. From the ashes of Byzantium, c. 1299–1453, the story begins on the rugged plains of Anatolia, a crossroads where Asia meets Europe, and empires come to die. The year is 1299, though the world doesn't yet know it marks the birth of something extraordinary. The Seljuk Sultanate, once mighty, is fractured by Mongol invasions. Amid the ruins, hundreds of small Turkish Beyliks fight for scraps of land, for identity, and for survival. In the northwest, near the Byzantine frontier, lives Osman, son of Ertuğrul, leader of the Kayu tribe of the Oghuz Turks. To outsiders, Osman is a minor chieftain, a warlord with barely a few hundred warriors at his command. Yet within his tent, a dream burns brighter than any empire. One night, legend says, Osman has a vision. A crescent moon rises from his chest and expands, growing until it covers the entire world. From that crescent, a mighty tree emerges, its branches stretching across continents, shading the lands with peace and power. When he wakes, Osman takes this dream as divine prophecy. His descendants are destined to rule the world. That belief becomes his compass. Osman's men, Ghazis, or warriors of the faith, see their conquests not just as raids, but as holy missions. Every village taken, every fort captured, is a step toward fulfilling that sacred destiny. Osman begins targeting Byzantine fortresses, testing the weakened defenses of an empire once feared across the Mediterranean. His warriors strike fast, vanish faster, and spread tales of a leader blessed by fate. The Byzantines dismiss him at first, a nuisance on the frontier. But as towns begin to fall and refugees stream eastward, whispers grow louder. The Turks are coming. By the time Osman dies in 1326, his modest principality has grown into a rising force. His son Orhan inherits not just his father's sword, but his dream. And Orhan wastes no time turning faith into empire. He captures Bursa, a shining city of silk and scholars, and declares it the first Ottoman capital. With its fall, the Byzantines realize this is no mere tribal revolt. The Ottomans are building something permanent. But how? Their armies are small. Their wealth is thin. The answer lies in their adaptability. The Ottomans absorb what works: Byzantine administration, Persian culture, Islamic law, and fuse it all into something new. They are not destroyers. They are builders. As Europe tears itself apart in crusades and feudal wars, the Ottomans organize. They welcome artisans, scholars, and soldiers from across faiths, Christian, Muslim, and Jew alike, offering stability in an age of chaos. Their enemies fight for kings. The Ottomans fight for destiny. By the mid-14th century, they cross the Dardanelles, stepping onto European soil for the first time. It is a moment that changes history forever. Their new leader, Murad Bur, creates a standing army unlike any the world has seen, the Janissaries. Recruited as boys from Christian families, trained, converted, and raised in the art of war, these elite soldiers owe loyalty to no tribe, no family, only to the Sultan. Their discipline becomes legend. Their silence on the battlefield is more terrifying than any war cry. When the Balkans resist, the Ottomans answer with precision and fire. One by one, kingdoms fall, Serbia, Bulgaria, Macedonia, until all tremble before the crescent. But victory comes at a price. At Kosovo in 1389, Murad I is assassinated by a Serbian knight, even as his army wins the battle. His son, Bayezid, called Yildirim, the Thunderbolt, takes command amid the carnage and swears vengeance. Bayezid drives the empire harder, faster. Within a decade, he surrounds Constantinople itself, the jewel of the Byzantines, their final breath of glory. The world holds its breath. Will the young Ottomans finally take the city that has defied conquerors for 1,000 years? But fate has other plans. From the east, a new terror rises. Timur, the Central Asian conqueror who claims descent from Genghis Khan. In 1402, at the Battle of Ankara, Timur crushes Bayezid's army. The mighty sultan is captured, humiliated, and, legend claims, forced to live in a golden cage. The empire teeters on collapse. The once invincible Ottomans fracture as Bayezid's sons fight each other in a brutal civil war. Is this where the story ends? Not even close, because from this chaos a new leader will emerge, one who learns from defeat, unites the empire once again, and sets his eyes on the greatest prize in history, Constantinople. And that man will be named Mehmed. If you're ready to see how a 21-year-old sultan did what no army in history could and changed the world forever, keep watching. The siege of Constantinople is just beginning. The fall of Constantinople, the young sultan who shocked the world. What kind of ruler dares to dream of conquering the unconquerable? What kind of boy looks upon a city that has defied armies for 1,000 years and believes he will be the one to take it? The year is 1451, the Ottoman Empire, battered and nearly broken after decades of infighting, suddenly finds itself in the hands of a 19-year-old boy, Mehmed II, son of Murad. His father's old generals whisper that he's too young, too idealistic, too obsessed with fantasies of conquest. They do not yet realize that this boy will soon be called Fatih, the conqueror. From the moment Mehmed takes the throne, one obsession burns within him: Constantinople. The city is more than stone and walls. It is legend. It is prophecy. The Prophet Muhammad himself had once said, "Verily, you shall conquer Constantinople." What a wonderful leader will her conqueror be? And Mehmed believes, deeply, dangerously, that he is that leader. But Constantinople is no ordinary target. It is protected by the Theodosian walls, massive triple fortifications that have resisted every siege since the 5th century. Behind them stands Emperor Constantine V, weary but resolute, the last guardian of the Byzantine world. The city may be a shadow of its past glory, but its spirit remains unbroken. Mehmed knows brute force alone will not bring victory. He begins to plan not just a siege, but a masterpiece. He orders the construction of a fortress on the Bosporus, the mighty Rumeli Hisara, positioned directly across from an older Ottoman fort. Together they choke the sea lanes and cut off Constantinople from help. He commands the creation of cannons larger than any the world has seen, monsters cast in bronze so vast that their roar will shake the earth. Their architect is a Hungarian engineer named Urban, who promises a weapon capable of breaking even the Theodosian walls. In the spring of 1453, Mehmed's army, over 80,000 strong, encircles Constantinople. On the walls, barely 7,000 defenders stand ready. A mix of Greeks, Venetians, and Genoese under Constantine V. The odds are impossible. But the defenders hold faith in their walls, in their saints, in their history. When the first cannon fires, the sound echoes for miles. The siege begins. For weeks, thunder pounds the ancient stones. The sky fills with smoke, dust, and cries of war. Day after day, Mehmed's soldiers hurl themselves at the breaches, only to be repelled. Arrows darken the air. Greek fire burns ships to ash on the sea. The young sultan watches from his golden tent, his eyes fixed on the city's towers. Every setback only hardens his will. Inside Constantinople, food dwindles, fear grows, but so does resolve. The emperor himself fights on the walls beside his men. Churches fill with prayers and candlelight, while in the Ottoman camp, muezzins call to prayer over the thunder of cannons. Two faiths, two worlds, bound by destiny and defiance. And then comes the twist, Mehmed. Realizing the chain barrier across the Golden Horn prevents his navy from entering the harbor, decides on an audacious plan. One night, under the cover of darkness, he orders his men to drag dozens of ships overland. on greased logs, across hills and forests, into the waters behind the city's defenses. At dawn, the Byzantines awakened to an impossible sight. Ottoman ships inside the Golden Horn. The impossible has happened. The last advantage of the defenders, control of the harbor, is gone. Panic spreads through Constantinople. Priests claim it's the end of days. Soldiers whisper that even God has turned against them. But Emperor Constantine refuses to yield. Better to fall with the city, he says, than live without it. The final assault begins before dawn on May 29th, 1453. Drums thunder like heartbeats across the plain. Thousands of torches flicker in the darkness as waves of soldiers surge forward. The air is thick with smoke, prayer, and death. First come the irregulars, the Bashi bazooks, thrown into the meat grinder to exhaust the defenders. Then the Anatolian troops. Each wave pushes closer, filling the moats with their dead climbing over the fallen. Still, the Byzantines hold. For hours the walls endure. But then, as dawn breaks, one small gate, the Kirkoporta, is left unguarded. A handful of Ottoman soldiers slip through, raise their banner, and open the way. The Janissaries pour in. The city erupts in chaos. Bells ring. Churches fall silent. Emperor Constantine throws off his imperial robes and charges into battle, vanishing into legend, his body never found. The last emperor of Rome dies sword in hand. When the sun rises, Constantinople is no more. The crescent flies above Hagia Sophia. The 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire has fallen. Mehmed rides through the gates on a white horse. He dismounts, steps into Hagia Sophia, and orders it converted into a mosque. Then he kneels, not in arrogance but awe. "Praise be to God," he whispers. "The city is mine." At just 21 years old, he has done what no army, no crusader, no emperor could do. The world changes in a single day. The Middle Ages end and a new age begins. Europe is stunned. Kings call for crusades. Scholars flee westward, carrying ancient texts that will ignite the Renaissance. The Ottoman Empire, once a tribal confederation, is now the new Rome. But even as Mehmed rebuilds his capital, now called Istanbul, and fortifies his empire, he is not content. He dreams bigger, always bigger. The Balkans, the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, all must bend to the Sultan's will. And yet, beneath his triumph, a question begins to whisper. How long can such power endure? Empires rise on conquest, but they crumble on ambition. As Mehmed's armies sweep across Europe, another storm brews on the horizon, one that even he cannot foresee. A new generation of enemies is watching, learning, waiting, and soon their cannons will thunder back. The world that Mehmed conquered is changing faster than any empire can hold, and in the shadows beyond his victories, the seeds of the Ottoman Empire's greatest challenges are already being sown. The Golden Age, sultans, scholars, and shadows of power, 1453–1566. What happens when a dreamer becomes a ruler of the world? What happens when conquest turns to governance? When swords are sheathed and thrones begin to tremble not from battle, but from power itself? After the fall of Constantinople, the young Sultan Mehmed II stands at the pinnacle of history. The world calls him Fatih, the conqueror. The Ottoman Empire now stretches from the Danube to the Euphrates, from the Black Sea to the Aegean. Yet even as the empire expands, Mehmed's gaze grows restless. For him, the conquest of a city is not the end, it's the beginning. He rebuilds Constantinople not as a spoil of war, but as a capital worthy of eternity. He calls artisans, scholars, and merchants from across the known world. Greeks, Armenians, Arabs, Jews, Persians, all are invited to live and work in the new heart of the empire, Istanbul. Palaces rise from rubble, mosques tower over markets, and the hum of languages blends into a single chorus of power. But beneath the glittering domes and marble courtyards, Mehmed's rule grows darker. His paranoia deepens. He trusts no one, not even his sons. He creates the law of fratricide, a brutal decree allowing each new sultan to execute his brothers to prevent civil war. To him, it is order through sacrifice. To history, it is mercy forged in blood. When Mehmed dies in 1481, the empire mourns, but also exhales. The man who turned the world upside down leaves behind two sons, Bayezid and Cem, who will immediately turn on each other. Cem flees, seeking help from Christian powers, while Bayezid takes the throne. For the first time, the mighty Ottomans find their fate entangled in the politics of Europe's courts and popes. The empire stabilizes under Bayezid II, but his rule is quiet, reflective, a pause after a storm. Yet in the shadows, something begins to shift. Trade routes change. Wealth flows toward the oceans, where Portuguese and Spanish ships chase spices and gold. The age of empires by land is fading. The age of empires by sea has begun. Then comes a new sultan, Selim I, known as Yavuz the Grim, and he earns the name. Where his father was cautious, Selim is ruthless. He executes his brothers, even his father's loyal ministers. His own father dies mysteriously. Some say poison, others say grief. But no one doubts Selim's will. He is not here to rule gently. He is here to reshape the world. Selim turns his fury eastward. The Safavid Empire in Persia threatens Ottoman unity with its Shia creed. In 1514, at Chaldiran, Selim's armies clash with Shah Ismail's legendary cavalry. The battle is brutal. Gunpowder against devotion, cannons against mysticism. The Ottomans crush the Safavids, proving that discipline and firepower have replaced valor as the engines of empire. But Selim's eyes do not linger on Persia. He marches south, into the very heart of the Islamic world. By 1517, the Ottoman banners fly over Damascus, Cairo, and Mecca. The last Abbasid caliph surrenders his title to Selim, who now bears not only the sword of a conqueror, but the mantle of the Caliph of Islam. The Sultan has become the shadow of God on earth. Yet, Selim dies suddenly, perhaps of poison, perhaps of fate. He leaves behind a son whose reign will outshine them all. When Suleiman ascends the throne in 1520, the empire stands at its zenith, but the young Sultan will carry it higher still. He is only 26, tall and thoughtful, a poet as much as a warrior. The people call him Kanuni, the lawgiver. The West will know him as Suleiman the Magnificent. From his first campaign, Suleiman proves unstoppable. He conquers Belgrade, humbles Hungary, and brings the mighty knights of Rhodes to their knees. In 1529, he stands before Vienna itself, the gateway to Europe. The city trembles. For the first time, Christian Europe feels the shadow of the Ottoman crescent stretch across its skies, but the siege fails. Rain floods the camps, supply lines crumble, and winter descends like judgment. Suleiman withdraws, but not defeated, only delayed. His empire remains vast, his ambition limitless, while his armies thunder across continents. Within his palace walls, another kind of power rises, soft, silent and deadly. Her name is Hürrem, born Roxolana. A slave girl from the steppes of Ukraine, she is brought to the Sultan's harem as a concubine. Yet she is unlike any woman before her, sharp, cunning, and utterly fearless. Suleiman falls in love with her, breaking centuries of custom by marrying her. She becomes his confidant, his political partner, and, whisper it, his queen. Together, they reshape the empire's soul. Hürrem's influence weaves through every decision, every alliance, every intrigue. Ministers rise and fall by her word. The Grand Vizier, Ibrahim Pasha, once Suleiman's closest friend, grows wary of her power. Their rivalry turns to poison. One night the Pasha is summoned to dinner. The next morning his body hangs in the courtyard. The Sultan never speaks of it again. The empire flourishes, its cities glowing with art and architecture. The great architect Sinan transforms Istanbul with masterpieces like the Suleymaniye Mosque. The Ottoman fleet dominates the Mediterranean under the Admiral Barbarossa, whose red beard becomes legend among sailors. Trade, scholarship, and law blossom under Suleiman's hand, but even golden ages cast long shadows. In the later years of his reign, Suleiman grows weary. His sons, Mustafa Selim and Bayezid, eye the throne. Court factions sharpen their knives. Hürrem fears that her own children will be killed as rivals once were. Rumors reach the Sultan that Mustafa, his eldest and most beloved son, is plotting rebellion. The evidence is thin. The whispers are thick. Suleiman's heart trembles, but duty wins. At Konya, in the royal tent, Mustafa enters to embrace his father. Instead, guards seize him. Moments later, the heir to the empire lies strangled with a silk cord. The soldiers outside weep. The Sultan does not. That night, the empire seems quieter, colder. Hurrem dies soon after, leaving Suleiman surrounded by marble and ghosts. His empire stands at the height of its power, yet he walks its halls like a man already buried. When he finally dies in 1566 on campaign in Hungary, his generals keep it secret for days, fearing chaos. His body returns to Istanbul in silence. His reign, 46 years of glory and grief, marks the summit of the Ottoman world, but history is cruel to peaks. From here, there is only descent. Even as the empire glitters, cracks begin to spread. Bureaucrats grow corrupt. Janissaries grow arrogant. Sultans to come will inherit power, but not the discipline to wield it. And beyond the horizon, new empires stir. Ships bearing flags of Spain, Portugal, and England now sail the seas the Ottomans cannot control. The world is changing, and the age of the sword is fading. Yet for now, the empire still stands proud, its banners shining under the sun. The world believes it invincible, but the truth? Empires don't die in battle. They rot in silence, and somewhere, within the golden walls of Istanbul, that silence has already begun to whisper. The twilight of glory, intrigue, corruption, and the shadow of decline, 1566-1789. What happens when greatness becomes inheritance? When the fire that once built an empire begins to cool into ceremony and comfort? The death of Suleiman the Magnificent in 1566 marks more than the end of a reign. It marks the slow turning of a wheel. The empire he leaves behind is vast, mighty, and rich beyond imagining. But its center, once forged by faith, discipline, and vision, has begun to tremble. Suleiman's son, Selim II, inherits the throne. He is no warrior, no poet, no statesman. The soldiers whisper another name for him, Selim the Drunkard. He prefers the company of his wines and musicians to the clash of steel or the pulse of governance. Yet in his pleasure something new begins, rule by proxy. The empire is now too vast for a single man's hands. Power begins to drift, to viziers, advisors, and most notably, to the women of the harem. From behind jeweled screens, mothers, wives, and concubines begin shaping the fate of empires. History calls it the Sultanate of Women. In the palace's golden chambers, the Valid Sultan, the Sultan's mother, wields influence like a blade. Kosum Sultan, the brilliant and formidable mother of Murad IV, becomes the true ruler behind the veil. She commands ministers, arranges marriages, and even decides who will live and die. For decades, her whispers outweigh the decrees of men. But power in the shadows is a dangerous game. Kosum's own daughter-in-law, Turhan Sultan, eventually turns against her. One night, Kosum is strangled with her own curtains. The harem becomes both throne and battlefield. Outside the palace, the empire still stretches across continents, but its heart begins to decay. Corruption seeps into the bureaucracy. Governors exploit provinces for personal fortune. Janissaries, once elite and disciplined, now act like mobsters, defying orders, extorting cities, even murdering sultans they dislike. In 1622, the young Sultan Osman II, desperate to restore discipline, dares to reform the Janissaries. They respond by storming the palace. The boy sultan is dragged through the streets of Istanbul, beaten, humiliated, and strangled in prison. The message is clear. The sword now answers to no one. The empire survives, but the spirit that built it begins to fade. Each new ruler inherits more gold than wisdom, more ceremony than strength. The treasury empties, yet the palaces grow larger. Grand viziers come and go like actors in a tragedy. Then, in 1683, the world changes again. The Ottomans march on Vienna, their second attempt to claim Europe's heart. The army, led by the ambitious Kara Mustafa Pasha, surrounds the city. Victory seems inevitable. The banners of the crescent shimmer under the summer sun, and Europe trembles once more. But the siege drags on. Supplies dwindle. The defenders refuse to yield. And then, on a cold September morning, the hills erupt with sound. Polish cavalry, led by King John Sobieski, charge down like a thunderstorm. The Battle of Vienna becomes a disaster. The Ottoman army collapses. The dream of pushing deeper into Europe dies in the mud. That moment is the turning point. The empire that once advanced relentlessly now begins to retreat. From the Danube to the Balkans, Christian states reclaim lost lands. In the east, Persia resists again. In the north, a new power emerges. Russia, hungry and rising fast. The Ottomans, long the nightmare of Europe, now become its fascination and target. European ambassadors flood Istanbul, not with swords, but with ideas. They bring clocks, telescopes, and books. The world is entering an age of science and discovery. But the empire, proud and inward-looking, clings to old ways. Still, amidst decay, flashes of brilliance remain. The Tulip era, 1718-1730, blossoms like spring after a long winter. Under Sultan Ahmed III, Istanbul becomes a city of poetry, fountains, and light. European fashions mix with Ottoman art. Music and painting flourish. The empire opens its eyes briefly to beauty beyond conquest. But beauty breeds envy. The Janissaries, humiliated by this new refinement, rise again in rebellion. Palaces burn, libraries are destroyed, and the dream of a gentle renewal ends in smoke. Sultans come and go, weak, strong, pious, cruel, but none can reverse the tide. The empire survives by inertia, not innovation. It becomes a patchwork of glory and decay, magnificent in ceremony, hollow in strength. Then, in the mid-18th century, a strange duality grips the Ottoman world. While scholars in Paris and London unlock the secrets of nature, the empire still measures time by the moon and faith. While Europe industrializes, Ottoman factories fall silent. The world begins to pass them by. Yet, for the ordinary people of the empire, peasants in Anatolia, merchants in Damascus, fishermen in Egypt, the Ottoman banner still means order. Taxes are paid. Laws are enforced. Prayers rise from thousands of mosques. Life continues, steady but stagnant. And then comes the twist. An empire so obsessed with survival begins to forget what survival means. Reformers emerge, desperate to save what's left. Some look to Europe for inspiration, others to the past. The palace trembles with arguments, modernize or die. By the late 18th century, a new name appears on the horizon, Sultan Selim III. Young, thoughtful and visionary, he looks upon his crumbling inheritance and decides to act. He introduces the Nizami Tedid, the new order. Western military training, modern weapons, diplomacy, even music, all part of a plan to drag the empire into the modern age. But the old guard, Janissaries, clerics and conservative officials, see only betrayal. They call him a puppet of infidels. Their hatred festers until in 1807 they rise again. Selim is overthrown and strangled by his own soldiers, the same Janissaries he once tried to reform. It is a scene that echoes Osman II's death 2 centuries before. The empire has learned nothing. As the 18th century ends, the Ottoman Empire stands wounded but alive, its borders shrinking, its prestige fading, yet its name still commanding awe. The crescent flag still flies from the walls of Istanbul, but beyond them, the world is changing faster than any sultan can comprehend. In Paris, Napoleon Bonaparte is rising. In Moscow, Tsars dream of marching south. And in the quiet streets of Istanbul, whispers spread that the age of the Ottomans, the age of the sword, the crescent and the divine throne, is nearing twilight. But the empire will not go quietly. It will fight for its place in the modern world, with reform, rebellion, and blood. And the next century will test whether the empire that once conquered 3 continents can survive the age of revolutions and machines. The fall of the empire, revolutions, betrayal, and the last sultan, 1789-1922. What if an empire could feel its own heartbeat slowing? What if the world that once trembled before it now looked upon it with pity and hunger? By the end of the 18th century, the Ottoman Empire was still vast in size, but small in confidence. The age of swords and sultans was slipping away. The age of industry, revolution, and nationalism was rising. Steamships now ruled the seas, once patrolled by Ottoman galleys. Factories thundered in London and Paris, while Istanbul still prayed for the past to return. The empire that had once conquered continents now struggled simply to survive. In 1789, as revolutions shook Europe and kings lost their heads, a new sultan took the throne, Selim III, young, idealistic, and deeply aware of the empire's decay. He dreamed of rebirth. He read European books, corresponded with ambassadors, and studied their armies. He knew the Ottomans had fallen behind, and he dared to change it. Selim's reforms, the Nizami Kedid, were bold. He established new schools, imported modern weapons, and raised a disciplined army modeled on European lines. His vision was to awaken the sleeping giant. But the old order saw only danger. The Janissaries, who had once been the empire's proud elite, now saw themselves threatened by these foreign ways. As Selim drilled his new troops, the Janissaries plotted his death. In 1807, they stormed the palace, their muskets firing into the night. The young sultan who had dreamed of saving his empire was dragged away and strangled by his own guards. The reformer died, and with him, the empire's first chance at resurrection. But history is full of cruel ironies. The man who would avenge him, Mahmud II, was one of the few who survived that night. When Mahmud came to power in 1808, he knew he could not rule with divided authority. He watched, learned, and waited. For years, he built alliances quietly, reforming the government and training loyal troops in secret. Then, in 1826, he struck. The day would be remembered as the auspicious incident. On that morning, Mahmud ordered the new army to surround the Janissary barracks in Istanbul. When the old soldiers rose in rebellion, the cannons opened fire. Smoke and flame consumed the streets. By nightfall, thousands of Janissaries lay dead. The centuries-old corps that had once conquered Europe was erased in a single day. It was brutal, but necessary. With the Janissaries gone, Mahmud unleashed a wave of reforms. He modernized the army, reorganized the government, and began tearing down the feudal power of local governors. The Ottoman Empire began to breathe again. But the air had changed. The people no longer saw the Sultan as divine. They saw him as human, and humans could fail. The 19th century became a century of survival. The empire's enemies, smelling weakness, closed in. Greece rebelled in 1821, fueled by nationalism and European support. When the Greeks finally won their freedom in 1832, the empire's illusion of invincibility shattered. One province had broken away, and others would follow. Yet amid this turbulence, the Ottomans found an unlikely savior, Europe itself. For every power that wanted to destroy the empire, another wanted to keep it alive. Britain and France feared Russia's advance southward, toward the warm waters of the Mediterranean. They preferred a weak Ottoman Empire to a powerful Russian one. And so began a grim irony. Europe would prop up the sick man of Europe for over a century, not out of mercy, but out of strategy. Then came the Crimean War of 1853. The Ottomans, allied with Britain and France, fought Russia on the windswept plains of Crimea. For the first time, the empire fought as part of a modern coalition. Cannons, telegraphs, and railways defined the war. And when victory came, it was bittersweet. The Ottomans had survived, but only with foreign help. The empire's fate now lay in hands not its own. The sultans that followed, Abdulaziz, Murad, and then Abdulhamid II, faced a world they no longer understood. Steamships replaced caravans, banks replaced palaces, and revolutions replaced empires. The Ottoman response was the Tanzimat, a sweeping series of reforms meant to modernize the empire and grant equality to all citizens, Muslim and Christian alike. For a moment, it seemed to work. Schools multiplied, newspapers flourished. Istanbul glittered once again, but reform carried its own poison. Nationalism, once a European idea, now spread through the Ottoman lands. Arabs, Armenians, Albanians, Bulgarians, and Serbs began to dream of their own nations. The very equality the empire offered became the spark for its disintegration. Then came Abdulhamid II, the last great autocrat of the empire. Cunning, calculating, and fiercely devout, he ruled for over 30 years with a mixture of fear and vision. He censored the press, built secret police networks, and crushed dissent. Yet he also brought progress, railways stretching to the holy cities, telegraph lines across deserts, schools in every province. To his admirers, he was the last protector of Islam. To his enemies, the Red Sultan, but even his iron grip could not hold forever. In 1908, a new generation of officers and intellectuals rose up under a single banner, the Young Turks. They forced Abdulhamid to restore the long-suspended constitution and step aside. For a brief moment, it seemed the Ottoman Empire would finally become a modern constitutional state, free, vibrant, and reformed. But freedom came too late. Nationalism, once a whisper, now roared. The Balkans exploded in revolt. Albania, Macedonia, Serbia, and Montenegro fought for independence. Each victory carved another piece from the empire's body. By 1913, the Ottomans had lost almost all of Europe. Only the shadow of their former glory remained. And then came the final blow, the Great War. In 1914, the Ottomans joined Germany and Austria-Hungary against Britain, France, and Russia. The sultans hoped for revival. What they found was ruin. Gallipoli, Mesopotamia, Arabia, names written in blood. Though they fought bravely, the empire was crushed by exhaustion and betrayal. In the deserts of Arabia, a British officer named Lawrence stirred rebellion, promising independence to Arab tribes. The empire's heartlands rose against it. By 1918, Istanbul itself lay at the mercy of the victors. British and French troops marched through its streets. The empire was carved apart by treaties drawn in foreign hands. The once mighty Ottoman world, which had ruled 3 continents, was reduced to fragments. But the story did not end in surrender. Out of the ashes, a new figure emerged, a soldier from Anatolia named Mustafa Kemal. In 1919, he defied the occupying powers, rallying what remained of the Ottoman army and the people to a new cause, not empire, but independence. For 3 years, he led a war that burned through the remnants of the old world. When it ended, the last Ottoman sultan fled aboard a British ship, his throne abandoned. And on October 29, 1923, the Republic of Turkey was born. The Ottoman Empire, 6 centuries of conquest, culture and power, was gone. But perhaps it never truly died. Its echoes live in the domes of Istanbul, in the laws of nations it once ruled, in the music, the food, the language, and the faith that still bind millions. The empire that began with a dream in the tent of Osman ended not in defeat, but in transformation, and somewhere, across the centuries, that old crescent still rises, quietly reminding the world that even empires can be reborn.